Um, as I say, in the past, I've been in awe of many wonderful performances, Gordy of the Grinkov, many of the Russian couples, Sally Peltier, Anton and Elena, and you'd get a special buzz, a special feeling and emotion about the performance. But I must say, I didn't get that from any of the pairs at the Olympics. I mean, the winners obviously were excellent, wonderful, but to me they were a little bit cold, a little bit clinical. The Chinese, of course, were good. I did like the Germans. I think they have a lovely program, beautiful program. To me, that's real pair skating. They have something special there in the concept of their programs. So no, can't say it was bad. I just felt I had seen more inspiring programs in the past. Well, I mean, they started off and she had the fall on the quad throw. Obviously a really nasty fall. Went down clearly, well, it wasn't clearly, but within a few seconds you knew they weren't going to carry on their program. But I was amazed at the duration of time between obviously stopping till when they picked it up from the point of interruption. Well, the procedure I think any referee should have followed and would have been directly, that they've stopped, you must get them over to you either by blowing the whistle, and if they don't hear that, standing up, beckoning them over to you, or getting the announcer to say, please come to the referee. So they'd come there more or less straight away. You would make sure that they would come to you straight away. You'd find out what was wrong and you'd tell them they had 2 minutes from when the referee decided, it's the decision of the referee, to rectify or whatever, get right to and pick it up from the interruption. But it appeared that they had maybe longer than this, 4 minutes or so. But the referee may have blown a whistle. I mean, on television, you really couldn't see what was going on other than the couple, the pair, seemed to go to their coach and discussion there. They seemed to take a long time to actually go up to the referee. I was quite surprised, well, very surprised, because it was a really nasty fall, but showed great courage and guts, yeah. I was surprised by their component scores, because I think that fall obviously should have been reflected somewhere. But although they've improved, technically they're good, I think they were slightly overmarked in the component score. I mean, if there's an interruption to the program, then there's the mandatory deductions. But I think that was more like what happened in the Four Continents, where the Japanese boy, the music was still going, and he clearly, I believe, I didn't see it stopped, didn't he, for 50 or what, and the deductions, the referee should have instructed the deduction, and it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. But this definitely wasn't, I don't think, in the same category. It was, they stopped the music, they stopped the program, they, would commence it from the point of interruption. So. I think before it was worse. That I remember at one competition a couple fell, and they could skate again at the end of that warm-up group, and then they introduced the 2 minutes for you have to pick it up for injury. Yeah, I can understand. I can understand that to a degree. It's like a boxer being knocked to the floor and punched out, then there's a time. Well, again, it's a time thing there. Maybe the 2 minutes is too long, but I can understand where Tomba is coming from. That if you can't continue, should you be allowed to carry on? Oh, it's very difficult because you're talking about two different systems, so, and I wasn't making my notes on what they were doing. I was just sitting there hoping to enjoy watching some programs without any stress of judging. But I do think that, as I say, their component scores for me were inflated, so I wouldn't have thought they would be wouldn't have been in the first three. But then I'm saying that without making notes on their first mark, There probably is a thread of truth in that one. Yes, I'm sure if it's probably another country, or might have been some complaints or dissatisfaction. Yeah. It looked really bad on television. I was actually shocked that, Olympic Games, and you hear that the tickets are sold out months and months and months in advance, and you see what looks like a half-empty arena. I can remember that, say, ITU championships, but not at Olympic Games. Not to the best of my recollection. I can't remember that. Oh, well, they're a wonderful couple. I mean, their performances over the years have been breathtaking. Washington, for one, they were a wonderful, wonderful couple. I remember when they first started out, years ago. But you could see. I mean, they were rough, they were raw, but you could just see them mature over the years. Great ambassadors for the sport. I suppose disappointment in the overall standard, I think. Again, as with the pairs, I always look back at the men's event. It's always been very thrilling. Not that it wasn't exciting, it was exciting because apart from Plushenko, who clearly looked as if he was going to win after the short program, there was excitement who was going to medal so there was that excitement. But skating itself for me was disappointing. As I say, I've seen quite a few Olympics where the depth and the good performances were quite a few, which you thought, this is really good performances, but I didn't sense the same at this Olympics. No, I mean, if you're good enough to be that, and not saying he is or he isn't, but if the system allows you to be good enough to be temp, that's the system you're in, and you have to accept it. I mean, I do like Jeffrey Buttle's skating and his programs. His musicality and his interpretation is wonderful. A great, great talent. He didn't skate the best he could. Lambiel, nice skater, good elements, wonderful spins, original, but I mean, he had a off night as well. I always remember when I first saw him on the senior, his spins were outstanding, and they seemed to go on and on and on and on forever. They seemed to got shorter because I guess he's trying to turn himself inside out like everybody else and move on to the next element. But no, I don't suppose either skater was totally satisfied in their performances, and Plushenko was Plushenko. Good performance. I think the way he sets up his programs is clearly element, and the first half to get a lot of the difficulty out. Perhaps it's not one of the greater programs. If you took the elements out and the spins out and everything, and you were just left with the program, there isn't much in places connecting transitions. Maybe his programs aren't the greatest ever programs, but you can't take it away from him that, he was the best that night and he produces when it counts. He's a great competitor, and that's what it's about, the bottom line, isn't it? Yes, it was surprising now whether they're trying difficulty beyond their capabilities or they're not consistent enough in practice. Therefore, when they do it in the competition, championship, more stress, they're just trying difficulties beyond what they can reasonably do in an event. Or maybe it was just the tension of being at the Olympics and it being a very open competition other than the gold medal. So maybe just the pressure, combination of everything got to them. I still can't figure out the judging of the ice dance. I mean, the compulsory dance, I was very, very surprised that the Italians won. Basically because he, for me, and I'm not saying I'm right, isn't a particularly strong skater. His edges, his body line, his stretch of his free leg. So I was kind of in shock that they'd won the compulsory dance. Looking at the compulsory dances, I just love the French couple. I think they're beautiful quality of skating. And the Bulgarians were good. The original dance, that was a real surprise. I don't think as long as I've been involved in the sport I've seen so many falls. That really was unbelievable. And there's tend to be, I think that this new system has had more of a detrimental effect on dance than maybe the others, because the dancings to me now, and the original dance and the free dance, they all look the same. Okay, the grade of execution, how they're doing, is obviously different standards, but it's so predictable now. The steps, the spins, the lifts. Everybody's trying to get the same difficulty.
The interminable twizzles.
Yeah, twizzle, one way twizzle, the other, then the straight line steps, and then the lift where the man goes round and round, runs as quickly as he can before he lets the lady land on, places her back on the ice. It's all so predictable. What made dancing so enjoyable to watch, where you could just sit back, listen to nice music, see wonderful artistic programs, now is just a series of elements. What made dancing good and enjoyable for Joe vlogs, the general public, is seems to be not there to the same degree anymore. Free dance, well, I'm just thinking of the free dance. I love the Bulgarians. I think they have wonderful body movement, artistry, a real passion and emotion on the ice. I thought they were great. And again, I enjoyed the French. They were exquisite skaters. Their edges and their lines are a joy to behold. Let's see what after that. Obviously, the Russians and Ukrainians were good, and the Americans were good, but it was the Bulgarians and the French and the Lithuanians programs I remember. I don't really know. I probably. I mean, it all depends if you think that question is politically, do you think they would win, or on skating skills they would have won. I don't know. After the Europeans, when they didn't skate well, or as well as they could, they won. So I thought they probably would win. I guess before Michel withdrew, I guess the ladies, I would have thought, was going to be the most exciting, because I thought that was probably more open. Oh, I thought that was great disappointment, because she's such a wonderful athlete and such a good role model for the sport, yeah. And I remember Michel, when I first saw her in an international competition in, I think it was Ortisay, her first junior international. And so I kind of tracked her career, been at many places she's been at, so yeah, it was sad. technically,
Yeah.
I mean, her elements, Slutskaya's elements were very, very good. Of course, Sasha has the most beautiful style and programs. Component scores are good, and Arakawa, she skated well. Well, no, because you could say with Sasha, her component scores are better than Slutskaya's, so no. Well, I mean, overall, it was the skating was not great, was it? I mean, I thought, somebody please stand up and do a performance, and then I kind of lost interest part way through. I must admit, I think I was the first program that kind of thought, well, this is a nice program at last, was Rogette from Canada, and then it kind of disappeared a little bit after that, and I just hoped that Sasha Cohen skated well, because I thought, well, she's, got a good chance here, and but she didn't start well, and then I thought, well, Arakawa skated very well, she clearly was the best that night. She skated very well, but then when Arena came on, I thought, well, all she really has to do is her normal self, because she is pretty reliable. You might not be a fan of her personal skating, but she have to hand it to the girl. She's a good competitor and she's very reliable, but she just didn't do it, and the program was a disaster. Maybe again it was nervous, but she doesn't come across as a particularly nervous type of girl, but maybe it just got to her because she wanted it so much, didn't she? This was the one thing she wanted. There was Olympic gold medal, and maybe she just tried too much, and because it was there for her to take, but it just didn't happen. And apart from missing the elements, the program is not for me that she's a components or a second mark skater. You can say her programs, a concept. There's not many transitions. Her body lines, her feet. You know what I mean? It is. She's not one of the better second mark skaters. So, but even saying that, her consistency in the jumps and everything, I thought that she wouldn't blow it in that way she did blow it. No, not for me. I mean, but when you look back and say at the great performances, say Sarah Hughes last time, or Lipinski, or Lucien, or Kwan, or I mean, going back over the years, that there have been, like in the men, outstanding performances and memorable performances, and the depth has been there. Whereas the ladies, to me, was very, very disappointing. Plus, it's so predictable now, the programs. You see the same kind of combination spin in the short, you see it transposed in the long, you see the same stats transposed, and you get fed up of seeing the ladies grab hold of their feet, sticking them up in the air, and the Biellmann and the spirals, whereas before a spiral sequence or movements in a program would be there to emphasize the music and go with the music and the harmony and the flow of the program. Now they're just stuck there as an element, and you can see them counting 3 seconds to hold it, then change of edge, change this, change of position, change, and there's no reason to have that in the program. It doesn't add anything to the program. So I do think the programs are suffering. Maybe over a while, when the skaters get used to this new judging system, the programs will improve, but I think it's not quite working at the moment. I won't call it worrying, because I think when you look probably back at all the Grand Prix this year in the last 2 years, there have been skaters, the Japanese ladies, doing the triple axel, and so I think it's just one of those fluky things that because the overall standard in the ladies event wasn't great, by a long way this year. Just one of those things that the best overall performance, even though she didn't do the triple, doesn't mean that the ladies skating technically is going down. It was just that one event it didn't happen at. Well, as I say, this would have been my 9th Olympics, the first 2 as a competitor and the other as a judge or a referee. So it was different. I find it, and this is not to say the new judging system doesn't have some merit, but purely watching it on television, it's not yet user-friendly. You know, because unfortunately on the British or the Eurosport, at the Europeans they did show you the 5 components, individuals. Well, they didn't, they just put the first total and the second total and that was it. So you look at these thinking, well, what does it mean? You know, you haven't got much of a clue what it means, and the skater looks completely bewildered in the kiss and cry. The coach looks bewildered. The only time that there's any kind of emotion is when the result comes up, you know, so they appear to be lost as I was watching thinking, well, the interest isn't there. At least when you saw a row of 5/8s or 5/2s, or you saw the 6 of the Dean or Torville, or you saw, you know, you knew what was going on. You could understand it. So I think some of the, not the entertainment factor, that's the wrong word by a long way, but it's just not so user-friendly on the television, I don't think. I'm sure the ISU wouldn't say anything else, but it was a tremendous triumph, I think Mr. Cinquanta said. So I'm sure they thought it was a success. I'm not saying long term. I think for this Olympics it was more of a disservice. But that isn't to say with a lot of tweaking, changing, amending, it can't in the end do a service. But I don't think it did. I think still it was too quick, too rushed through. I think many things need to be, well, not many, well, perhaps many things need to be adjusted and changed, yeah? So I think the skating, the enjoyment of the programs wasn't there this time because of this new system. But once perhaps the skaters and the coaches and changes are made, it doesn't mean it can't grow, that you will see some memorable performances in the end. I think in any sport, take skating out of it, if it was anything, I think it's healthy when you see different countries win. When you see one country so strong, correctly strong, nobody's saying they're not strong for any reason. Perhaps it's not good for the sport. You know, it's better, as I say, to divide the medals up, but facts are they're producing the best skaters, so you can't take that away from them, you know. So Mr. Cinquanta might have thought of that perspective from the growth of the sport, and everything's better to share. I think it's kind of a rather a strange comment. I mean, you know, I think the reason, I mean, if you're blaming the members because the coaches aren't teaching the right way to make the system work properly or whatever it is, I mean, you can't blame the members, I don't think, or the skaters. You know, you come up with a new system. The system needs to be amended and changed. You know, you can't say the system's right and the skaters are wrong and the coach is wrong and they got to, I'm sorry, you know, you have to be a little bit more fluid and say there are some problems in this system, we're going to address them. Let's listen to the coaches and what the skaters are saying, because at the end of the day, we want the best of the sport, you know, and changes need to be made with it. Well, I'll go a little bit of history. When I judged, I always used to make big differences in the first and second mark when I thought the skaters deserved it, you know, like a 4-5, a 5-5, because I just had a very good, I just enjoyed especially marking the artistic impression presentation section. So when I became chairman of the committee, the figure skating technical committee, I wanted to really go into depth the education in the second mark. Because although there was education before, there wasn't to the same degree as I wanted to do it. Because always before it was tagged on as part of a seminar. You know, we talked about the artistic impression, the presentation. So I met up with Lori in, say, the early 90s, when she was with Frank, and we got introduced, and I immediately took to her. You know, sometimes in life, you either like people or you dislike them, you know. Your first sense is usually your right sense. And we really hit it off, and I asked Lori if she would help me create seminars just on the presentation mark, 2.5-day seminar, where the components, and there were 8 at the time, including unison and pair skating, which were divided up. And, you know, Lori would talk about ballet and art and paintings, and every section would be talked about. And also with skating skills, we brought Annie Shelter in, who's a wonderful expert on basic quality skating. And we looked all back on memorable performances and said, well, harmonious composition, we would like that. Originality, Gary Beacom. Easy movement, Janet Lynn. Style, John Curry. So they did a wonderful job, Lori, going through all the videos and putting these all together. And we had the judges talk about, you know, their emotion and feeling and light and shade and art and history and music. We brought music involved. So instead of saying, well, I liked the performance, we wanted to make it not subjective, you know, like originality. Okay, that can be a little bit objective, but harmonious composition, like it is with the components. Well, it's not subjective. You've either got linking footwork and things, or you haven't. You either have a good style, or you haven't. You either have musicality, music interpretation. So we wanted to educate the judges that they knew exactly what the criteria was for the 8 ingredients that made the presentation mark. So Lori and I worked really, really hard for a long, long time together, which were great years. It's not true at all, I'm afraid. No, I mean, from the mid-90s, the judges, I don't know how many 100 judges we had each, you know, those years that were educated. So they knew now. It's different if knowing and whether they used it when you know, when they were giving their marks, whether that knowledge was reflected in their marks. And at the end of the day, some people take more on board than others. But the education was there, and to be quite honest, the committee I was on was the committee that created the education in the second mark, and people now have just taken what we did and what we worked hard for so many years and transposed it now exactly the same into the components, because when you look at the criteria and the breakdown, they're more or less exactly the same as what they were in the presentation mark, but under different headings. You know, nothing's really changed. It's just the headings. I think the first mark, you know, they try to take the subjectivity out, and it does have some good points in, you know, about the levels of difficulty. But that could have been, I mean, the judges knew before that a triple axel was worth more than a double axel, that quad was worth more. So there were always the degrees of difficulties in the jumps. Okay, that could have been tweaked more And you know what's more difficult, the rockers, counters and everything, the footwork and counter rotational ups and downs. I mean, if you know skating, you knew. So maybe, that needs to be more clarified, and I'm saying that probably is the best part of this new system. But saying that, they're all the skaters trying to get the same difficulty. So they're all looking the same. So, the components, I don't think the judges know what they're doing quite with the components, because the human brain can't subdivide into 5 sections and divide into 6 bullet points. I think basically, probably more than I think, I maybe the insecure judges are just seeing what they got at previous competitions in the component score and doing the same. We start off with a 6.25, you might go up to 6.50, you might go down, because they don't want to be an anomaly, so they play safe. Right. So I think they're going to have trouble marking correctly the components. Yeah, I think in this system that it's more clearly defined, you know what I mean? With the footwork, the different levels, more clearly defined, everything's more clearly defined than it was. I mean, if you're a knowledgeable judge, you should know that that footwork is more difficult because of that, or that entry is more difficult, and to do a double axel from a spread eagle is more difficult than doing a long. It's all basically, skating is common sense. So this system definitely makes that clearer, and there's no fudging. You know what I mean? The components is more or less exactly the same as what was in the presentation, Mark. No, you'd never know. I mean, that's a tragedy of this system, is the secrecy. And I cannot for the life of me understand why the ISU is being so stubborn over this point. They say, oh well, because members did put pressure on the judges, so this way the judges are free. I believe Dick Pounds made a comment about, about the judges will, I mean, sorry, if the judges aren't independent and strong-minded, if they're in fear of their members, they shouldn't be on the panel, And to say that it's going to make honest judging, I think the reverse, because I do think maybe some countries, maybe their ethics and their sense of integrity maybe isn't as strong as with other countries. Maybe they're weaker personalities, and I think they think maybe if everything's hidden, perhaps they won't be as honest, because there's this comfort zone. They feel, well, if I have 1 or 2 friends around me, we get together, we're not going to be an anomaly. We might not be honest, but we'll never be found out. So it's helping them carry on in this manner. Well, can I go back to, I mean, I think they still have a round table meeting, or whatever they might call it now. But one of the good parts of the event review meeting was actually the education factor, because you could ask a judge what they'd done, you could discuss the deductions openly on every skater. You could say, well, why did you have that skater second in the presentation, Mark? You had him 12th. That's a big difference. Would you like to talk about it? Would you like to talk about it? So there'd be a dialogue of views, and from that dialogue, somebody would go away from that meeting, felt, I've learned something, or I was wrong. Now, so one of the very important ingredients in the education and the assessment of the judge, because a judge can sit there and just the way they speak, inherently that that judge knows skating. Whereas another judge might have on paper what you think is not a bad result. They open their mouth. It was more luck than judgment. They haven't got a clue. Well, they got a clue, but not a great clue. So it was a very important factor, which has now been, disappeared. And now we've got this Officials Assessment Commission, which no doubt, hopefully they've got the very good people on it. But saying that, from what I've learnt, is that they will look into people that are anomalies, and they're going to broaden the corridor. So, but that, again, I can't understand the common sense in this. If you broaden the corridor, then you're saying that more and more judges' marks points are correct, or views. it can't be that way. Until the powers that be can say the corridor or the majority are wrong, and these guys who have marked fairly and honestly are right, isn't, widening the corridor is not going to get fairer or more honest judging. Right. It's just going to save the one or two judges that have been honest or different or so-called out of line. It's going to save them. But it's still saving the people that have been wrong. And that isn't right for the sport. Well, my committee and myself were never involved in any discussion on the length of time. That was purely, under misconduct, that was purely a council decision. And I said the only input I had was when Mr. Cinquanta phoned me up and asked me, as he didn't know the rules appertaining to figure skating and judges, and that what was the length of time he could suspend Marie Lagoon and that she could still come back into the position she previously held. Because, if you don't have activity or seminar for so many a period of time, you get demoted. So I said, well, if she had 36 months or less, she would come back into her formerly held position, which was a judge for ISU championships. And that is exactly what she got. It suggests to me that he wanted not to really damage her future, because I did say, I remember saying that if you give her more than that, she would have to take the judge's examination again and, get started again. So in fact, it was being very kind to her, very generous, letting her off the hook, which she should never have been let off. I think outside of figure skating, that probably would be I think that's a conclusion most people would jump to. I don't know. I try to think, spent many hours thinking why stronger action wasn't taken against them, and I believe that some of the council members even wanted less than the 36 months. I wasn't privy to the council meeting, so this is just hearsay, but I believe that was the fact. And I still don't know why, the real truth, why they didn't want to go after both of them, or probably will never know, actually. I really don't have much. I mean, it's disappointing that I believe all the champions from Torino aren't going to be there, so it'll be kind of a disappointing event, maybe. But saying that, several times after the Olympics, when not all the competitors have gone on, it has turned out to be quite a good championship. So hopefully hopefully, you never know, it might be better skating than at the Olympics, even though the champions aren't there. I think that's what we can hope for, really.